I'm certainly happy to be here again for the affirmation of the proposition that was read at the beginning of our session. It seems to me that Brother Merideth forgot what the proposition was. Most of his speech, it seems, was designed to get off on another subject as to whom or for whom care may be given by the church. We're not here to discuss that in this discussion. We're here to discuss benevolent organizations, whether or not churches may build and maintain such. That's what the proposition says, and that's what I intend to discuss. Now, I trust he'll do the same thing. But by far, most of what he said had to do with whether certain passages was individual or church in application or both. Be that as it may. That has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations. And that's what we're here to discuss. We both agree the church is to relieve some needy people. Now, for those for whom the church is responsible, may it contribute to, may it build and maintain these benevolent societies. That's what the question is, and that's what we're here to discuss. Now, Brother Merideth wants to discuss the other question. We've already signed some propositions. I've agreed to discuss that subject for 4 nights with him in the future if he'd like to do that. But let's not get that in this discussion. And so, Brother Merideth, let's get back on the subject. Let's get back on whether or not churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations. I'd like to read Brother Merideth's questions and answer them. Question number 1. Does the church sustain any obligation at all to orphan children simply on the basis of his being an orphan? The church is authorized to relieve saints, brethren. Anyone who comes within this category can be relieved by the church. This would include some orphans. And here's a person that is a saint, and if he becomes needy as a saint, he may become needy as an orphan, and thus he can be relieved by the church. But that's not really on the subject, Brother Merideth. Question number 2. Would it be scriptural for the church to buy a piece of ground, build a house, and supply it with the needed equipment, hire the necessary help, place orphan children in it, and provide the money for their care? The church may choose the how with respect to the methods that it uses in relieving those for whom it is responsible. If such were needy, it may choose to provide a place, necessaries, and personnel in caring for them. Of course, the church would have the oversight of its work. And Brother Merideth believes that the church may build and maintain benevolent organizations to have oversight of this work. Obviously. Question number 3. He says, true or false? All passages which authorize the performance of religious acts and which make specific reference to the Christian individual are passages which authorize the indicated acts to be performed by the individual Christian exclusively. You know, sometimes there are some ways you can answer some questions besides saying true or false, or some statements. And I mean in order to explain exactly what you believe about something. Brother Merideth, if passages are addressed to individuals, then certainly those passages apply to individuals. If passages are addressed to the church as such, I'm talking about specific duties now. I'm not talking about just a letter in which you have some instructions both to individuals and to churches. Then, of course, you'd have church obligation. There are some duties that may be performed in connection with the assembly, some individual duties, because some passages indicate that such is or may be done. Such is to be or may be done. Number 4, can the needs of an orphan child be adequately met without his having or being a part of a home? In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. It depends upon the particular orphan. If he has a home, you wouldn't need to provide him one. He might need something else and be needy. He might have a home. He might not have any food. He might have a place to live. If you mean place or family relationship, in every instance his needs may be met without his being a part of or his having a benevolent organization such as Childhaven Incorporated. Do you understand that, Brother Merideth? That in every case, every needy person may have his needs met without his being a part of or his having a benevolent organization like those shown in the charts. Question number 5, in which institution did God locate the work of child care? Brother Merideth, he did not necessarily locate it in any institution as such that I know of. If you know the passage says so, I'd be glad to accept it. God gives the father primary responsibility to provide for his children, Ephesians 6 and verse 3 and 4. However, as a child becomes the responsibility of the church, or if it becomes the responsibility of the church because it's a needy saint, then the church would relieve that particular person. But the church would do the work, and the church would oversee its work, like in the field of evangelism. But most of those questions have absolutely nothing to do with the proposition as whether or not churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations. And then I asked Brother Merideth, question number 1, is the local church its own missionary society and its own benevolent society? He says the church is not a missionary society. The church is not a benevolent society. Brother Meredith, you need to convert Brother Woods on that, don't you? Brother Woods has taken the position that it is both a missionary society and a benevolent society, publicly, and that's what he believes and advocates. You need to convert him on that. Did you rather know that Brother Woods, one of their champion debaters, has for years contended the church is its own missionary society, that it is its own benevolent society, and here comes a man and says it's not either. Well, then whose society is it to preach? In other words, is it not? If it's not a missionary society, then it's not doing missionary work, is it? It's not a society, organization, institution to do missionary work, is it? Now, you've got a problem there, Brother Meredith. You need to do a lot of converting. You need to go back and convert all these brethren that's been debating this through the years, because they all agree on your side that the church is God's missionary society. It's His divine organization to preach and evangelism. And you said you agreed with these charts over here where I showed the principle that when God specifies, others are eliminated, and that's one thing I showed, that the church was specified to do evangelism, edification, and relief work, and you said you agreed with these. We've all been preaching this, he said. Well, you must not agree with it. You don't believe it. And you can do better than that, Brother Mary. I know you can do better than that, and I expected better than that of you. And you can beat that. Now, don't say you agree with it and you come up here and say the very opposite. You don't believe the church is a missionary society. Well, this chart showed it was. Some of these charts did. Do you mean it's not for missionary purposes? Or it's not a society of any kind? What do you mean by that? Explain yourself. Extricate yourself. Then question, he says also there are 3 divine institutions. Each are to perform their function. He said each may collapse and each may be restored. He says the state, the home, and the church. Of course, he didn't give any passage for all of that. He just talked about it. I'd like some passages along those lines, Brother Meredith, if you don't mind it. Just give me some passages that show that each may collapse, each may be restored, and who is to restore each one of them. And there, Brother Meredith is arguing that the church may restore the home when it collapses. What does it restore, Brother Meredith? Does it restore a place that the needy person had, or the relationship is in, or this benevolent institution you're talking about? What does it restore? You need to explain yourself on that. And upon the same basis, then, could the church restore the state when it collapses? You say it's a divine institution. Could the church make contributions to the state? If here's a government that collapses, can churches of Christ build and maintain civil governments? That's what you've got in benevolent societies. You've got when a home collapses that churches can build and maintain benevolent societies. Well, why not civil governments on the same basis? Since it's a divine institution, you say. You're in a lot of trouble. Now, don't just get up here and talk. You tell us some things. You tell us what God's book says about these things. Don't just talk about it. And then he says, well, we can restore the church, when it collapses. Well, I tell you what, if you didn't do any better job of restoring the church than you do restoring the home, you wouldn't have much of a church. Now, here's the church at Philippi. Here's the bishops and deacons and the saints, Philippians 1:1. But they collapse in some local place. So then we could take Brother Meredith could take a pope and bishops and archbishops and priests and start another church and have it restored by his way of reasoning, there'd be as much similarity between that and the true church as would between these benevolent organizations and what that child had to begin with. Question number 2, are such benevolent institutions, namely the proposition human institutions, or are they divine institutions? He says legal homes are divine institutions. Also, he says the church government are divine institutions. Well, I don't know where you find that in God's book, or what principle. I'm not saying specific now. I'll take any kind of authority for it. Just show the principle that shows such. And so he said legal homes are divine institutions, you know. And so what he's saying is that these things between the churches and their work, or the work that's being done, whether it's theirs or somebody else's, are divine institutions, he says. Now this Boles Orphans Home, for example, between the church and the work, he says, is a divine institution. This is not a home. That's the name of that organization. That's a group of men. That's not a place. That's not a relationship. That's just a corporation, an organization, a society. Now over here you have the home. You had 2 homes under one society, one board, one organization. He didn't deal with that. He knows that that's so, though. He knows that's so. I read in the chart of the corporation that shows that this thing is to provide this over here. And then this home down here, Stephenville, Texas, is under a different board now, so that means that there used to be one human organization that oversaw 2 homes, and now there's 2 human organizations overseeing those same 2 homes. And yet he says, oh, that's just a legal home. No, you don't have just a legal home, brother Meredith. You've got something here that's providing some homes. And that's the thing that we're saying is not in harmony with the Scriptures for churches to build and maintain. You think churches can build and maintain these things, brother Meredith? Name one that churches have built and maintained through the years. You name one that is church-owned or church-operated that you're defending. Well, I don't claim to be, but I want you to name one really that really is. And when you do, if you're not careful, you're going to get this thing over here in the framework of the local church, aren't you? And you say that can't happen. You got problems if you do and problems if you don't. With your position. May an individual Christian's responsibility to his children to provide medical care and secular education be discharged collectively by his contributing money into the church treasury, and then from that treasury a contribution be made to hospitals and schools such as Freed-Hardeman College. He says, the home is a divine institution. The school is simply an adjunct to the home, and the church is not to contribute to the school. Isn't that a good work, Brother Mary? Then Galatians 6:10 say, that we're to do good to all men. Are there some men involved over there? We're not doing good, send them a contribution. They want it, don't they? They send out letters soliciting it. The presidents of some of these colleges send out letters asking churches to send contributions to them, and you say, if it's a good work and there's no difference in individual and church obligation, or an individual can fulfill it through the church, when I let it do that in the case of the school. But you say it can't. You didn't show why. You just say it can't. I say it can't on the same basis it can't do these other things here, Brother Mary. And I said, please give a passage or passages for a congregation to contribute to donate funds from his treasury to a home. And he said, I'll give an answer Brother Britnell gave. And he said, they need a home. A church can provide a home. Acts 6, Acts 4, and Acts 11. Well, I didn't ask you what Britnell said. I'd like what you have to say about it. And it just so happens that Acts 4 and Acts 6 and Acts 11, neither one of them talks about contributing to a home. That's what I asked you about. We're not talking about providing a home that is a place where somebody needs one. We're talking about contributing to a home, whatever you say. Contribute to it. Not just provide a home for the needy. You didn't deal with my question. Question number 5, do the Scriptures authorize congregation to make contribution of its treasure to the Red Cross, other non-religious organizations, general benevolence? If so, please give the Scripture. He says when he talks about general benevolence and the Red Cross, he's mixing them up. Mixing what up? What am I mixing up? You mean the Red Cross don't engage in general benevolence? What does it engage in? You mean when it helps people that's been victims of tornadoes and victims of floods and things, that's not benevolent? And then they just help everybody, that's not general? What do you mean we're mixing it up? And can individuals do that? If individuals can, and the way you've been reasoning then, the church can, and so therefore the church can discharge, the individual discharge the responsibility through the church by contributing to the Red Cross.
Amen.
And these other organizations. But I want us to go a little bit further. And I'm going to say a few things about what he said, although he didn't really deal with the subject. But he said, Brother Sutton's in the affirmative, I'm in the negative, that means I must follow his speech. Well, why didn't you then? That really amused me. He said, boy, I got ready, I thought, boy, he's going to get after me now. And then he started some other direction, put all these things up here. He didn't follow my speech. He said he ought to, but he didn't. Then he talked about the history of Boles Home, and he said 1927, here's something Roy Cogswell said. Brother Meredith, was Boles Orphans Home set up back then like it is now in 1947? I mean 27. I'm not trying to defend Roy Cogswell. He's wrong about a lot of things. He might have been wrong about that too. But my point is that wasn't set up like it is now. You said that was 1927, didn't you? Did you know they weren't even chartered? It wasn't a corporation chartered in 1937, 13 years later. I mean 10 years later. So maybe there's some kind of difference that's evolved since that time. But he wasn't defending what you're defending. I don't know. I'm just asking. And the same thing about what Tant said about Maud Carpenter and Haley said about it. Well, I'm not saying, see, it may not have been then like it is now. It might have been some kind of setup where the church is doing its work. Do you know about how it was back then? I don't know. I doubt that you do either. We're talking about these metal organizations like we can see how they are now. When he talked about me affirming a negative, he said, show how it can be done. Well, Brother Meredith, you do the same thing. If you debate a Christian church preaching instrumental music, you affirm a negative, and I do too. So don't be talking about that. You know that's the way all of us do. We affirm a negative a lot of times. If a thing is wrong, we affirm it's wrong. That's not difficult to understand, is it? We affirm instrumental music is wrong. I've debated folks and affirmed it's sinful to use instrumental music in worship. Would you do that? Well, sure you would. And then he used one of his charts, talks about visit. Well, the issue is not whether orphans or widows of James 1:27 should be visited, and we agree that church is responsible for some folks, Brother Meredith, whether it's those or not. May churches build and maintain organizations like we're talking about for the care of those for whom it is responsible. That's what we're talking about, and that's what you haven't touched yet. And then he said, well, in chart number 14, he said, well, may the church pray for wisdom, the do of the word, practice pure religion, and so on. Well, that's not the issue, Brother Meredith. If I agree that it can on every one of those points, you must still ask and answer the question, may churches build and maintain benevolent organizations? See, that doesn't deal with our issue. If the church can pray for wisdom as a church, that's fine. Now, can it contribute to benevolent organizations? Can it build and maintain them like these we're talking about? And that's what you haven't touched.
2 minutes.
And he said, well, his Tennessee Orphan Home, he referred to my chart number 3 where it's talking about his Orphan Home Benevolent Society, and he said, it's just meeting, we just have an orphan home, so it's just meeting legal requirements. He said, we have trustees on the deed of church property. He said, would it be wrong to have trustees, for church property? That is, Brother Meredith, and surely you know better than that. I'd like to have chart number 38. Surely you know better than to think that these trustees or these directors of these institutions are just like having trustees to hold church property. Do you think they're the same, Brother Meredith? Do you believe that when Boles Orphan Home and his Orphan Home and so on have these trustees here, this board of directors, that control all of the work that's to be done, make every decision, that's what these trustees of churches do, church property? You don't believe they're parallel. Surely not. Let's notice right here.
1 minute.
And we have on one side trustees of the local church, make no laws to govern local church, have no right to act on their own. They're controlled by the church. They cannot receive and spend money at their own discretion in the work of the church. They cannot exist without a congregation. They have no control of the preacher's house or anything else. They act only as the church authorized them to act. They hold in trust something for the church with the church having oversight of it. In the case of directors, these benevolent institutions, they make laws to govern the benevolent institutions. They make laws to do so. They have a right to make their own decisions. They're controlled only by the charter they made. They can receive and spend money at their discretion in the work of benevolent institution. They can exist without facilities and personnel, and they can control every house they build and every person they care for. They're not the same. You know that they're not the same, Brother Meredith. How would this over here justify this? when the directors of the institution have complete control oversight of the work being done, and the trustees of local church have no oversight of any work to be done. Thank you very kindly.